to be going through the various features of the PixieDust package. I'll be going through the Wrangle data method. So assuming you have all the installation steps finished, all you need to do in your notebook is import PixieDust Rosie, and then you can use the Wrangle data method. So the Wrangle data method takes a CSV as an input. Right now that is the only supported type we are taking for this. We can take a file path or a URL to a download link, and with that you can run the import, and you can run this method. For here I have a file with an HCUP CSV, which is a medical data set. So what this is going to do is it's going to take 50 sample rows of the data set, and it's going to start by creating your schema and your sample data. So with your schema, you can see you have the column name that was extracted, the Rosie type, and the column type that maps to in a pandas data frame. And then you have your suggested transform, which I'll get into later, and then the various actions that you can perform on each of these columns. So as you can see here in this data set, I have various columns: year, location abbreviation, and you can see that in the sample data here, which is your sample set of 50 rows. So you can do various actions on this data through the Wrangle data UI. You can do a very simple rename. So I can rename this column to date, for example. I can delete. So I can go ahead and delete this column. And just as a note, any modifications that you make in this UI will not affect the actual file. They're all kept in separate objects and will be created into a new CSV, so you don't have to worry about losing any data in your original CSV. Okay, and then what we can do is transform. So what transform allows you to do is, using Rosie and PixieDust, it allows you to extract data from the columns to create new columns. So you can start from scratch, is what we'll show you first. So we'll show you this indicator column. And so here's some of the data. Prevalence of major cardiovascular disease hospitalizations among all hospitalizations US adults. So there's a lot of information. What I want to extract from it is just the part that says major cardiovascular disease hospitalizations. So everything after prevalence of and before among. So I'm going to use Rosie to do that, and I'm going to use my transform method. So here I can click this action button, transform column. So there's 4 parts to this transform screen. So there's a part where I build my pattern, which is this box. I can get help with Rosie, and it'll have a link to Rosie documentation to learn Rosie better. You have the column that you selected and the sample data from that, and then the new columns that you'll create once you finish your pattern. So the first thing I have to do is finish my pattern. So at the start, what you have to do is define your general pattern. So this general pattern is going to include 2 things. One, any string literals or things that you want to exclude from the columns, and then the columns that you want to define. So in this case, I want a column called disease that's going to contain everything in between prevalence of and among all hospitalizations and the rest. So what I'll do is I'll have a string literal called prevalence of. So this will be ignored, but it won't be captured for a column. And then I'll define my column name that I want to call disease. And now I can do extract variables. And so what that'll do is that gives me the columns that I now have to define. So in this case, disease is the only column that I want to define. So I'm going to go ahead and define the pattern for disease. And I'm going to use a Rosie macro, keep to everything before among. And now I'm going to go ahead and create my columns. So now what has been created is a disease column with that extracted data. In the case where it doesn't match the pattern, you're going to see none be replaced instead of a pattern. Okay, so now I can commit my new columns, and what that's going to do is it's going to create those new columns on the sample set right after indicator you see right here. And then again, we can see it in sample data right here, disease. So another thing that can do is Rosie can also suggest a transform. So if Rosie recognizes a pattern that it can split, it'll offer a suggestion. So in this case, let's use breakout ID. So I'll go ahead and click that transform action. It would ask if I want to use the suggested transform. I'll say yes. So you see that it's populated all the fields that we need, and it's created the columns for you. So it's split the string and the numbers. So you see alpha and numeric. And if I want to start over from scratch, I can always hit clear and start over from scratch. But I'm going to go ahead and commit these columns. And you can see if I go to the bottom, right here I have alpha and numeric. And the same thing here. You can see alpha and numeric. So now once you're done and you're happy with all the things that you've done to transform your data, you can go ahead and click finish. And what this is going to do is it's going to take all the patterns that you defined and then run it on the entire data set. It's going to create a new CSV file and it'll give you the path. It'll create a pandas data frame variable and it'll give you the name for that. And then it'll show you the number of records that did not match the pattern. In this case, it's 0. But if there were more than one, you could look at the errors and see which lines gave you the errors. So now you can see it's given me a generated cell with display Wrangle DF. Wrangle DF contains the data frame. So I can use PixieDust to now display my newly created data set. And I can do different visualizations and such with the PixieDust package. So that's everything. Thank you.